In chapter 22, we talk about responsibility accounting. And in responsibility accounting, we're looking at how product lines, departments, uh, different units or different divisions of companies operate. We want to look at performance management for those areas. What would happen if maybe we dropped a product line, what the effects would be on the total company, and making those decisions. We do various analysis about the different departments. The first example that we're going to look at is creating a responsibility income statement. In a responsibility income statement, we break out the different divisions or departments or product lines and do their own income statement and then look at what their contribution is to the entire company. Instead of a regular statement, income statement where we have sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross profit, then minus expenses equals operating income, we're going to be looking at the contribution margin and the responsibility margin for these departments and divisions. So it's sales minus variable costs equals contribution margin, and then contribution margin minus traceable fixed costs equals their responsibility margin. Fixed costs can also be broken out to in what is controllable by the manager of that department and what is not controllable by the manager of that department. So when we make that income statement, we have our information here. So we have information about routers and Ethernet switches. So our sales is given here. And then it tells us that our variable costs for the routers are 40% of sales. So we'll take our sales amount times 40%. And for Ethernet switches, we have variable costs of 60%. So our sales times 60%. Contribution margin is sales minus variable costs. And for the entire company, it is the two lines added together. Our traceable fixed costs are 200,000 for the routers and 100,000 for the switches, giving us a responsibility margin, contribution margin minus traceable fixed costs of 340,000 for the routers line and 20,000 for the Ethernet line. Okay. Then we look at we have the company as a whole. So common fixed costs that are shared over the entire company are 120,000. So our income from operations is our responsibility margin minus our common fixed costs. So when it says showing percentages as well as dollar amounts, on an income statement, we show percent as they are of sales. So sales is 100% and everything else is what it is as a percentage of sales. So if we take in our sales, we would have sales divided by sales. We want to lock our denominator cell so that we can copy our formula in Excel. We want every single line to be divided by sales. So then we can just copy our formulas all the way down. So here we have variable cost divided by sales, contribution margin divided by sales, traceable cost divided by sales, and so forth. Do that for each We can then use these percentages for different analysis and different things that we're going to look at. For example, we're going to look at an example in the next three tabs, over the next three tabs, where we're going to be using our contribution margin percentage to look at various factors for those stores. So first, we're going to look at this business here. This Drexel Hall has 3 stores, and our responsibility margin income statement has already been developed. So we already have the income statement and the different percentages. So we're going to do some analysis about things that we can do in the 3 stores and what their effect will have overall on the company. Okay. So what we want to do is look at what will happen if we come down here. So we have A. Assume that by spending an additional $15,000 per month in advertising at any store, sales in that store would increase by 10%. Which store should the company advertise in? So when we're looking at an increase in sales, we don't want to have to do all of the math, sales minus variable costs and all of that. So we can just look at our contribution margin. So all of our stores have $600,000 in sales. So an increase of 10% would be an increase of $60,000 in sales. So we can look at the increase in contribution margin for each store. So we would take that $60,000 sales increase times our contribution margin percent for the stores. Store 1 is 38%. Store 2 would be 60,000 times the contribution margin of 37%. And store 3 is that increase in sales, 60,000 times the contribution margin of 45%. What we can see here is that we get a higher amount of contribution margin increase in store 3. So if we can only spend an additional $15,000 per month advertising any single store, that store should be store 3. Another reason for choosing store 3 is because store 3 currently has negative $6,000 in responsibility margin. A 10% increase in sales would give us a positive responsibility margin, and we would no longer have negative contribution from that store. Question B says, which is the most profitable of the 3 stores and why? So if we look at this information, we see that while store 3 has the highest contribution margin, store 1 actually has the highest responsibility margin. So overall, to the bottom line, after we look at fixed costs, store 1 is contributing the most to the entire company's bottom line. So store 1 is performing the best. Then at C, it says, which store manager seems to be most effective in their planned strategy and why? Well, if we look at this paragraph here, we see some different information about their strategies. So store 1 has less cost because their store is older. That's not really a strategy, that's just what they have. Store 2, however, follows a policy of minimizing both costs and sales prices. So they work really hard to control their prices and their costs. But store 3 follows a policy of providing extensive customer service, and they charge higher prices than the other 2 stores. So if you think about the fact that store 3 has higher prices and store 2 has lower prices than any of the stores, the fact that all three have the same dollar amount means a little bit more than in that instance. Because store 2 is charging a lot less than stores 1 and 3, and store 3 is charging more. So in essence, store 3 sells less items to get to that $100,000, and store 2 sells a lot more. Additionally, store 2 has the lowest amount of traceable, controllable fixed costs, which means that store 2 is is strategically doing quite well at minimizing both costs and their sale prices. They have an effective strategy and it is working well for them.